NECA's feeling a bit froggy. Here's your look at the NECA toys: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Punk Frogs, Rasputin, and Genghis. Designed to be Shredder's amphibian counterparts to the Turtles, the long-awaited Punk Frogs are united with the heroes in the half-shell, starting with Genghis and Rasputin. Yes, we're on our way to the Okefenokee Swamp to check out some new turtle, or frog, releases from the folks over at NECA Toys. Before we get down to the review of both the Punk Frogs, obviously we're going to want to figure out how tall they stand. They're pretty much going to be the exact same figure, so what I'm going to do is only measure one of them, and I'm going to take the tape measure right to the very top of his head. Both the Punk Frogs stand 5.57 or 5.5 inches in height. We can switch that over to centimeters, revealing that the Punk Frogs are 14.1. Let's just say 14 centimeters in height. Let's get going with some size comparisons. I'm going to bring in just one of the turtles so you guys can see the difference with a regular turtle compared to the Punk Frogs. They're going to be roughly about the same height. You could reduce the size of the frogs by bending their knees and have them slightly more crouched down. But if you have them straightened out, they're going to be roughly about the same height as a regular turtle. We can also bring in a couple of other size comparisons. Let's bring in Master Splinter, just simply because we don't ever seem to really bring in Master Splinter for comparisons, and it also gives you an idea comparing the turtles or the frogs with a slightly smaller figure. We can also bring in April O'Neil for the same reasons I've already stated, and I kind of give you, again, a good idea of how the Punk Frogs, Genghis, and Rasputin stack up with some of the others that NECA have put out. Well, what do we know about NECA turtle figures? We know that the figures always come with a lot of accessories, and both the Punk Frogs come included with quite a fair share, actually, and specific to each one of the frogs. Let's have a look at those right now. Not necessarily a case specifically for the frogs, because we've seen these ones released before. They come included with not one, but two turtle communicators, which appear to be exactly the same to one another. Flip around to the back so you can see the back of them. These are certainly cases when it comes to accessories, things that I appreciate, even if I'm not going to display them necessarily with the Punk Frogs. The very idea that you get things, bonuses like this, I can easily use these with other turtles, even though those other turtles tend to have them already. From there, I think we'll look at the accessories then specific to each one of the frogs. To come included with the Genghis, he comes with the disguise that he uses while he's traveling on the bus to visit the turtles. It is all constructed in one piece. Well, that's not necessarily true. The glasses, as you can see, are attached to the under rim of the hat. It does have some nice shadowing done to it, so the back end of the hat has the darker of the two browns. And they've also panel lined the front, just really giving it that nice look that it's been animated. Now, you can fit this, obviously, onto the head of Genghis. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the figure, and basically just sits on top like that. I wouldn't necessarily say it's frictioned, but it's shaped appropriately that it sits right around, well, if you look at the inside right here, there's definitely a specific shape and a placement. It also helps, too, that you know that the glasses are going to be facing forward. But once you get it far enough down, I wouldn't pick it up necessarily by it, but it stays really well onto the figure's head. That looks so fun. What you can also do, too, in case you're curious, because I'm sure somebody probably would ask, just put the frog down for a second. If you grab, say, a random turtle, let's just go back to Raphael because I used him at the beginning of this review for comparisons. You can also put the disguise on Raphael, although it doesn't quite fit as well. This isn't as good as, say, the disguise-packed turtles. But again, if you wanted to disguise one of the turtles with a disguise like this, you can do it. Although you can clearly see it's more designed to be displayed on Genghis's head. This is really fun. To come also included with the two frogs, you get the mutant trap that was used by Dirk Savage, Mutant Hunter. It is made of molded of plastic, of course. It's a slightly more softer plastic than the figures themselves, and have some real bold detailing added to the front. The clasp there done in the black, and some additional white there on the sides as well. It kind of looks small, like it should be containing a tiny pet, but instead what you're supposed to do is take one of the figures, again, I'm sorry, Genghis, going back to you. All you do is basically just take the foot, slide it down like that, and it imprisons the frog in place, preventing him from going anywhere. I think perhaps maybe I'll keep it on him for the time being. Again, sorry, Genghis, we're just going to keep it on you for the time being, as we have a look at the rest of the accessories that come included. Now, he also comes included with his regular frog self, before, of course, he becomes mutated. Don't worry, also, Rasputin also comes with the exact same one. It's the exact same one in the sense that they're molded the same. The panel lining and the detailing, you could also say, is the exact same. But the coloring of the plastic is, of course, very visibly different. They have, of course, matched the same coloring as the actual frog bodies. So when it comes to, of course, Rasputin, he's got the darker green. When it comes to Genghis, he's got that more lighter, almost neon highlighter green. Really fun, the fact that they included those. Of course, both the turtles, both the frogs, also come included with some swappable hands. You get a couple of pointing hands, and you get a couple of closed fists. Currently in the sockets of the forearms on both the frogs, I actually have them with the gripping hands because, of course, that works better when holding the accessories that also come included with them. Genghis comes included with his axe. If you're thinking that's an imperfection on the plastic, it isn't. There's these nice little notches that they've sculpted onto the side of the head, and that actually is the case on both sides. The handle, as you can see, has got that nice darker brown. Well, the majority, I suppose, minus the blades of the head, are this dark gray. And it actually fits quite well into his hand. Okay, we'll free you now from your prison. Go ahead and just take the figure. I guess you could really technically go with either one of these hands, but I kind of like to display them on this side. And I will say, it didn't involve me having to force the fingers away from the palm to actually get him to hold the axe properly. It also seems, too, like the plastic that they're using is a little bit more pliable. Still, if you're cautious when it comes to picking up these figures and you're worried about joints and stuff like that, still go the route of heating these with a hairdryer or submerging certain areas in hot water. I haven't had the issue so far, knock on wood, with either one of the frogs, but you can certainly do that if you're somebody that's a little bit more worrisome when it comes to these figures. But there is, of course, the axe in his hand. And one of the other things that come included with actually both of them, really, I keep wanting to put the frogs back down. He also comes with a swappable head sculpt. Now, it seems like they've flipped it, because the one that comes included with Rasputin is actually like this head sculpt, with this being this one being the interchangeable one. Let's go ahead and actually just remove the axe from his hand for the time being. I will say one thing about the swapping of the heads, at least in, well, I guess both cases, really, because both of them have the exact same issue. Both have great looking head sculpts. One is more just a regular smiling face. The other one has the more visible teeth on either side of his face. Whatever head, though, you decide to swap out, it becomes a little bit more tricky, because when you are popping the first head out, just wiggling off the ball joint, there you go, you'll be instantly greeted by a really large ball peg. This would certainly be a case where, when you're first doing this, heat, again, that socket, the opening on the bottom of the head, with a hairdryer, or again, submerging in hot water to fit it onto the ball joint. I mean, once you do get it in place, I haven't actually heated it just yet, because I didn't want to warp it for the purpose of this review. I wanted to show you guys the size of the hole and the size of the ball peg at the time of getting this out of the packaging. I've spent, of course, a few necessary hours to look at the figures, but I didn't really want to doctor or alter the size of that hole, so you guys can see. It's about the same size as the ball peg. And short of you actually just forcing it on there, don't do that. Don't spend the unnecessary force to do it. Just instead, like I said, heat this up, and you'll find it pops onto the ball joint like a hot knife through butter. Hot knife through butter. Let's go ahead and pop that back onto his body. There we go. When you are twisting it back on place, or at least the defaulted head sculpt, you'll notice there's that satisfying snap. You won't get that necessarily with the swappable head until, of course, you run through the gambit of heating it up first. I suppose, actually, technically, seeing as we've already looked at all the accessories for the figure, why don't we actually get now a closer look at Genghis. I want to keep calling him Rasputin, but this is Genghis. The figure itself, actually, both the figures seem to share the exact same body, right down to the necklace that they're wearing. Not only is the coloring of the plastic quite bright, but again, the panel lining really gives it that cartoon vibe. Both of them are sporting shirts. It seems like the shirts could be something that you would be able to remove, but that would involve you then popping the forearms off, and you'd still have the issue that the sleeves would be left behind from the shirt. So even though it looks like it's a separate appliance, obviously you're probably not going to want to remove that. The detailing, though, like I said, on the faces, either one of the faces that you decide to go with, are really good. I really like the coloring that they've went with. Still, I think for a case like this, I'd probably be more inclined to display the frogs with alternating head sculpts. If I decide to display Genghis with this head sculpt, I'm probably then for Rasputin probably going to swap it and have the other one, if that makes any sense, just so that they don't have similar looking faces. In fact, even though we're not going to look at him just yet, I wanted to show you the one that comes included with Rasputin. It's pretty much the same head sculpt. I would be hard-pressed to really see if there's a difference between the two. Again, it's more so just color than anything else. So you can probably understand why when it comes to displaying these frogs, I'm probably going to be more than inclined to display them with the alternating head sculpt. So if this one has this head sculpt, yeah, you know what I mean. Spinning the figure around so you can certainly see it from the back. I really like this purple that they use, and also you can see that there is a real dividing line where shadow is hitting on this side of his shirt, and on the front side of it, you're having that lighter color. The transition is gradual, so it's not a very stark line, but you can definitely even see, like on the arms, for example, and on the legs, he's definitely got a more darker color on the back side, and that lighter color then on the front. Let's have a look at the articulation here on Genghis. His head rotates back and forth, being that it's on that very large ball joint. Once you have it rooted down on that, at least the head isn't going to be going anywhere. It sways back and forth. Although, yes, you're going to have a little bit more limitations just due to the size of his face. The arms hinge out. And I guess you could pull off successfully a 90-degree angle bend, or just a little bit short of that. The arms rotate all the way around. It does have a single hinge on the elbow. Now, I have noticed that of the two frogs, his joint in his elbow is still a little tight. I've gone in there and tried to slowly bend it in place, but again, I'm going to take the hairdryer to that, soften that up just a little bit more. I don't have that issue necessarily with Rasputin, which I guess I really should have just looked at that as the articulation on both the figures. Now, both the figures will have the same articulation. Upper torso is on a ball joint. Lower torso seems to be just on a straight swivel. And a lot of that probably had something to do with the way that they've sculpted the shorts. I'm not necessarily bothered by the fact he just has straight swivel, because technically he does have the ball joint on the upper torso here. So that's more than enough for me. Legs split out. You can go forward and back on the legs. This is all softer plastic up here, by the way. He has the double hinge on the knee. And then when it comes to his feet, both the frogs, and we'll spend a little less time doing it when we look at Rasputin, but they do have the hinge back and forth on the feet, and you can also hinge them, well, ankle pivot them back and forth. Get a good look at the size of the footing on the frogs here. That's a lot of Fs. Really large-sized feet. I can only imagine the size of shoes that they would have to buy. And of course, they do have peg holes on the undersides of their feet, so if you want to make use of a NECA display stand, you can really do that. Moving on to the accessories that come included with Rasputin, I'll spend a little less time talking about things like his hands and things like his head, simply just because I felt I spent a lot of time talking about that when we had a look at Genghis. He comes included with some arrows, and he comes included with a bow. But, of course, if you wanted to have him displayed with arrows, a quiver would be most useful. And at least he comes included with that. The strap for the quiver is made of a softer plastic. The one thing I would suggest when you are putting it on top of Rasputin's body is first removing his head, just because it doesn't give you enough wiggle space, and you really don't want to stretch this to the point where you're going to break that plastic. So instead, go the smarter routes, the safer routes, and first remove Rasputin's head. Again, you're still dealing with that larger ball peg, but from there at least, you can take, let's flip it around the other way, you can take then the quiver, fit it around his torso a lot easier, and then just go ahead and replace his head. Just while you're doing it though, just make sure that the strap is out of the way. And then go ahead and just put the head back down. Now, when we had a look at Genghis, I was mentioning about the fact that they have the swappable head sculpts, and even though, again, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the additional head sculpt here on Rasputin, simply just because it's the mirror flip to the one that came included with Genghis, just the coloring is a little bit different. You're still going to have issues popping that back into place. We'll want to heat that up. Hair dryer, water bath, whatever your personal preference is. But again, you can swap this head sculpt for this head sculpt right here. Anyways, let's go back. I want to make sure I securely plug this into place because I don't want his ball joint. There we go. I didn't want the ball joint on the head to free and the head fall off. That'd be horrible. Anyways, with the quiver now in place, let's put the figure down and address the arrows that come included with him. He comes with actually 4. Some of them are samesies. So in fact, like these ones right here, for example, they seem to be all identical. There is, unfortunately, it almost looks like blood. There's a little bit of paint, unfortunately, on one of the arrows. The other 2 are fine. My guess is there was just a little bit of paint that found its way off of the feather and unfortunately onto the actual, I guess, stem of the arrow. And you can go ahead and fit those actually into the back quiver. Just like that. He also comes included with a variation of arrow. Make sure we can flip this around so you can see the eyeball there. It is, again, a little bit larger, but still, he has more than enough space on the back of his quiver to even fit that onto the back as well. So he technically could fit all 4 if you want to. Of course, he's not going to be firing much of anything unless he didn't have a bow. And he does have the bow that comes included with him as well, with a very tight line on the back. Pulling off, actually, one of the arrows for the time being. Let's fish this one out for right now. There is a little clip on the very end of it, a little pincer that fits right onto the strap of the bow. And you can pull that off. Don't fire it across the room, whatever you do, because you're probably not going to be able to find it. But it'll also come included with that as well. The one thing I did notice, though, when it came to the bow, is there's a little lip right on the end of it. See that right there? I don't believe it serves a purpose with the figure. At least not that I can find. I don't see a section on the arrow anyways that has a hole or anything like that that would attach to it. So I'm really not sure what that lip is specifically for. What I do know, though, is it's a nice looking bow. Has the little cross hatching of black panel lining. Again, to make it look as cartoony as possible. Cartoony? We're going to go ahead and run with that. You can also go ahead and fit the bow in either one of his hands. I have already mentioned, I'll state it again, that he has softer plastic in the hands, and that's actually the case on both the figures. So when it comes to them holding the accessories, I have no issues whatsoever. I don't really have to feel like I'm fighting to get those hands free, or at least the fingers free from the palm. The other things that come included with the figure is basically just the same accessories, at least for hands. You got a couple of peace sign. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. The one that came included with Genghis, let me show you the difference between the two. Genghis's hand was just a straight pointing finger. Rasputin's hand, on the other hand, I see what I did there, actually has a peace sign. Or 3 Stooges poking you in the eye. So there's a little bit of difference going on there as well. And this one technically does have a couple of other hands. So really, they're not exact copies to one another. Genghis's hands were all closed fists. At least Rasputin has the benefit of some additional hands. A little bit different, at least. And of course, the last thing he comes included with is that same swappable head that we've already spent, I feel, too much time talking about already. I love the fact that, again, we get some swappable heads. If only, though, NECA Toys would have used a smaller ball peg system. So it just wasn't as much of a hassle to try to get that onto the ball peg. Again, we can go back to the same thing I mentioned already. Use the hot water bath. No, not you. Or the hair dryer. Soften up that plastic, pop it in place, and you'd be good to go. Looking at Rasputin's body, I felt the need to bring Genghis in so you can see that the figures are identical to one another. They have shared the same mold, and it's only really the paint that differs from one figure to the other. It doesn't really bother me at all that the fact that they are using the same mold. If at least it means that we're getting 2 of the 4 punk frogs. I say 2 of the 4 because we still need to get Attila the Frog and Napoleon Bonafrog before we get the full 4 set complete. I guess they could technically have released a 4-pack. I don't think NECA has ever really approached a 4-pack release of figures, and probably would involve being more expensive. Then yes, it makes a lot more sense that they just split the pack into 2s. Get 2-pack of the 2 frogs here, the Rasputin and Genghis, and then of course I'm sure we're going to be getting them packed together, the Attila the Frog and Napoleon Bonafrog. Anyways, looking at the back of the figures, again, the costuming is the exact same. The length of shorts are the same as well. It's really, again, the paint when you look at the 2 side to side is really what differs. So go ahead and we'll put Genghis back down. I feel so bad. I keep picking up Genghis and putting him back down. Getting a closer look, though, at Rasputin. Of the 2, though, I would honestly say, and maybe that's why I was a little biased looking at him first, I think I actually like Genghis just a little bit more. Rasputin, though, has some really bright colors going for him. Something I didn't really spend a lot of time talking about when we looked at Genghis was the nice spotting that they put on the front of his face as well as on the sides as well. paint on this, I'm sure, sound like a broken record, is very clean. He had, of course, that little mishap when it came to his arrow, but, you know, for the rest of the figure, there's a lot of really good paint application applied here. Even like little areas where the sleeve would wrinkle on the character. Really some nice touches of detail. Of course, you got the darker colors. It seems like it's a little bit more standout here when we look at Rasputin, simply because his coloring, that's the types of green that they went with for Rasputin. It results in the figure being a lot more darker, especially on the backs of his arms and the backs of his legs here. But it's the same construction, so again, nothing really changes with the figure, and even the necklace is the same between the two. Looking at the articulation here on Rasputin, I know it probably sounds like deja vu, the fact that we've already done this, so we'll just rush through this quickly. The head is still on that ball joint, still the same as Genghis, although I will say when it comes to Rasputin, his arms were already a little bit more easier to bend when I took the figure out of the packaging. In fact, my real intention when reviewing these guys was because I already had no issues really with bending the arms. I was really going to just use the articulation from Rasputin to show you guys. But I ended up ultimately just starting the review with Genghis and end up having a slightly more tighter joint in the elbows. But again, the arms do move back and forth. All the same stuff. I know. Hands move back and forth. Still the waist swivel, the upper torso ball joint. All the same construction with the same legs. Double hinge on the knees. And the articulation on the feet. Again, we are getting now 2 of the 4 punk frogs. And the idea that we're getting such cartoon accurate looking molds on both these figures, we can certainly, well, I'm certainly looking forward to the other 2-pack being released, that being again the Attila the Frog and Napoleon Bone of Frog, before finally, we have all 4 punk frogs that can be displayed along with the rest of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm sorry, but nobody is doing better Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures than NECA Toys. Of course, there's other companies that have produced Ninja Turtles. Obviously, they're not the first company to produce Ninja Turtles in the first place. But if you're in the market of getting the cartoon-looking turtles, look no further than what NECA's putting out. They've had a proven track record of releasing not only the main characters that have come out in the years prior, but now expanding that line to introduce characters that may have had only 1 or 2 episode appearances. Like, for example, the Punk Frogs. 2 of the 4, of course here we got Rasputin and Genghis, still overlooked our Attila and Napoleon, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time before we get those other 2 frogs, because after all, even in the cartoon, the frogs don't really look that much different from one another. They could easily just use the same mold, which they've already done with Rasputin and Genghis, change out the color scheme on both the additional frogs, and maybe just change out a couple of different accessories. Attila had the Morning Star, and Napoleon, I think, had the whip. So really, other than just molding brand new accessories, I think you're good to go to get probably the additional 2 punk frogs and probably like I said, the not so distant future. I'm not bothered at all either. The fact that they are using the same mold and really just changing out the colors. The only thing that differentiates Rasputin from Genghis, short of the accessories that are in their hand. If it means that we are getting all 4 of the punk frogs, and if it means that we're also continuing to get more episode specific characters with what I also might add, episode specific accessories, count me into the idea of reusing the exact same molds. Both the frogs are great looking figures, though my favorite of the 2 is Genghis. I just really like that bright yellowish kind of green color scheme, not to mention the purple shirt with the yellow polka dots. It reminds me of American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, for some strange reason. I guess the other one, Rasputin's shirt, would probably be a little bit closer, but no, Dusty Rhodes had the yellow polka dots. The yellow polka dots. Why are we talking about Dusty Rhodes? Needless to say, though, the Rasputin and Genghis, 2 of the punk frogs, are available right now in retail stores and online, should you wish to pick these ones up and add them along with the rest of your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle collection. A big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that provided the sample of Rasputin and Genghis that we could have a look at in this review. If you guys are new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. And keep, of course, those peepers ever peeled, because not only are we going to be looking at some more TMNT releases from NECA Toys, but we are also going to be looking at some more NECA reviews in the not-so-distant future. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.